Susan, it's so great to finally be able to get together again.
Oh, it sure is. And I really appreciate you picking up the bill.
I'm happy to. I've got the extra cash. Since we've all been driving so much more again, I've been using Get Upside, the free gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy.
Wait a minute. Are you saying you actually get paid cash when you buy gas with the Get Upside app?
Yes, up to 25 cents a gallon. Cash back every time I buy gas.
Does that actually add up to anything?
Some months I make $200 to $300.
Wow, that's serious extra cash. I'm downloading the free Get Upside app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code PHIL for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 50 cents a gallon on your next fill-up. You can cash out anytime to PayPal or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code PHIL for a 25 cents a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's code PHIL.
The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Big Wednesday. What's happening, everybody? October the 13th. 6 days, the countdown now until the start of the NBA season. And we have Josh Lloyd for you on the program today, who I know you guys are itching to hear, so we won't delay for too long. I just do quickly want to say hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. This is a Hoop Ball presentation. I'm your host, Dan Besbris. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris. You can follow Hoop Ball on Twitter at HoopBallFantasy. The website is hoop-ball.com, and I would once again really kind of beg of you all to go check out the Twitter stuff. I know that social media can be a relative fun house, not in the fun way, in the what's in that mirror kind of thing, but if you use it right for basketball, there is a way to just get the information you desire. So do check out Hoop Ball on Twitter at HoopBallFantasy. It's got up-to-the-minute fantasy news breaks, everything that comes out about every team, every player. And I personally, today, I'm going to have some threads on some of the most talked about players, and we'll be doing that stuff all season long. So do check it out. Again, that's at Dan Besbris on Twitter, DanBesbris. Foregoing the show opening monologue today because we want to dive right into the juicy stuff, and so we'll do that now. No waiting around. It's the one you've been waiting for, folks. Welcome back to the podcast, to the great Josh Lloyd, who I know has only one goal on this show, and that was, what did you say your goal was for this episode, Josh?
I just want it to be more downloaded than Matt Smith's episode. I need to get that back over him.
You can follow Josh on Twitter at RedRock_B-Ball. You probably already do, but on the off chance you don't, RedRock_B-Ball on Twitter. Josh Lloyd of Basketball Monster fame. So, first of all, hi. How you doing, man? How's it been?
Good, Dan. How are you?
Hanging in there. It's been a weird, 2.5 seasons of basketball, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Nothing's felt normal in terms of the timing and breaks, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to next off season to get that proper 2-3 months off.
Yeah, I had a question for you, and I didn't. This wasn't something I planned on asking, but now that you mentioned the off season, I wanted to throw it out there. Have you found? Because I'm always trying to watch trends on social media and just how buzz is happening around the NBA. Does it feel like people sort of forgot basketball was starting until 10 days ago?
If I base that off numbers of people watching my show or listening, then yes. Because I was like, what? The numbers normally pick up here, and then it hasn't. And then the last week they've gone, oh, no, everything's starting. Let's all jump on and start firing it up right now. So, yeah, it feels like maybe they're week, 2 weeks behind.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at, too. And I felt like you and I are probably both, looking at numbers behind the scenes and going, where is everybody? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, October hit, and yes, basketball has returned. So, very happy to have you back on the pod. Normally, at this juncture, we talk mostly about the mock draft team, and I think we can use that as a jumping off point, but you're I think you're the last mock to talk to, which was partially by design, because I think we can segue into some draft day stuff as well. But the first thing First of all, Josh had the 4th pick in our mock, and this is, again, from like 2 and some odd weeks ago at this point. But you had James Harden at 4, and there was some pretty substantial Kyrie Irving news that broke not shortly before we were recording this segment. What do you think? What does that do to James Harden? Or were you kind of already factoring that in, with the news being, of course, that Kyrie is basically not involved with the team until he gets vaccinated at this point? So kind of who knows, I guess. But you had Harden at 4. Do you look at him potentially as going higher? Was it already baked in? I thought it was really nice timing that you had James in the mock draft, and we can use this as our starting line.
From memory, Dan, we did that mock before any of the unvaccinated news came out, and I think that's sort of where I had Harden anyway, even with Kyrie there. So the fact that he can drop in double-digit assists and no one's going to do that, pushes him, and he's still going to get his defensive numbers, and his scoring will be somewhat of a hit, and all that's fine. So I had him at number 4. To me now, he is a clear top 3 guy. I'd probably take him at 2 in a lot of situations. I actually did a mock a day or 2 ago, and I took him at number 1. And what are you doing? You can't possibly take him at number 1. It's got to be Jokic. I go, Jokic has had one top 1 season ever. Harden has been like a top 3 guy for 7 years, and now he's got an opportunity to do it again. Like if you took him at 1, and I think you've said this before, there is absolutely no guarantee that Jokic repeats as number 1. It doesn't happen all that often. No one expected him to be number 1 last year. There's about 5 or 6 guys who can be number 1. If you want to take Harden at 1, 2, or 3, I wouldn't let him get any further down than 3. But to me, he's a pretty clear top 3 player.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you on that one. And I actually did a segment on the Monday show of this week, which was basically making the case that Steph could also be a number 1 pick. Is there, between those 3 guys, is it kind of like a 3-sided die at this point? Who goes 1, 2, and 3?
It's probably one of the most common questions that I get asked. The other most common question I get asked is, hey, is Moses Brown going to play 25 minutes for some reason? But the other most common question is, who do I take? I've got this pick in the first round, or I'm picking it the first round. And Dan, I don't know how you approach it, but my answer is, in general, it doesn't really matter that much. Like,
no,
I could go, you have to take Jokic, you have to take Harden, you have to take Curry, but whatever. Like, whoever it is, if you take Curry and he ends up, he slipped and he's the 3rd player, it doesn't kill anything. It doesn't ruin your draft. It doesn't do anything like that. If you take Jokic and he goes to 4th, it's not the end of the world. Like, we can't predict with that certainty, but everyone focuses so much on what do you do in that first round. Unless you don't do something stupid like I'm going to take Chuma Akiki at pick 4, I think you're going to be okay in that first round. So we put way too much focus on, I've got the first pick, I don't know what to do. But just flip a coin, mate, and whatever one you end up with, I think your margin for error there is just so wide that it doesn't actually make that much of a difference. Now, pushing Harden up is fine if you want to take Steph 1. Look, if you want to take Karl Anthony Towns at 1, okay, who knows? Like, Jokic wasn't number 1 last year. Anthony Davis could end up being the number 1 player this year. Look, I don't know. I probably wouldn't do it, but I don't think that making those picks is going to completely destroy what you do.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think this news, it does push. I feel like the discussion was really Jokic was 1, and then everybody was sort of fighting about what you do at 2, and now all of a sudden it's like, people feel like Jokic should still be 1. The fight maybe now about Harden and Curry, but I feel like the battle really is sort of fairly even, and even if you look at the second half of last season, Steph was 1, Harden was 2 on a per-game basis, and Jokic was actually 5 behind Kyrie and Jimmy Butler. So there's... like you said, it probably doesn't make that big of a difference, but also it's not nearly as cut and dry as a lot of folks out on the Twitter sphere would have you believe at this point. Next guy on your board, and again, this is really just sort of a jumping off point. The next guy on your team from this mock that I thought was interesting was Colin Sexton, who I know you've been pretty high on actually for a couple of years now. I think we talked about him before last season, and if I'm remembering right, you said it's just really hard to find a great scorer like that as you push through the 5th, 6th, 7th round type of range. Do you see Sexton improving in certain categories this year?
That does sound like something I would say, so I'm gonna suggest that it was what I said.
Which is amazing because my memory is hot garbage over the last, how old's my kid? Roughly 5 years. I don't remember much.
Let's be clear. I do not think that Colin Sexton is a particularly good or impactful winning basketball player, and I've been on record many, many times saying I think Darius Garland is by far their best prospect and currently best player for the Cavs. Like, I will say that. But the Colin Sexton, doesn't hit enough threes, doesn't take enough threes, doesn't get any rebounds or assists or steals. All that holds true. But getting a 24-point scorer who's close to 50% field goal percentage, and you sometimes find him at pick 80, it's ridiculous. So that's value. And separating whether I think this guy is a star or a really good NBA player or he's so impactful for winning versus, hey, is their fantasy value because he slipped 20 spots too far? Like, they're completely different discussions. So I can come out and say, I don't actually think Colin Sexton's that good. And I think, in the next 3 years, he probably moves into a much smaller, lower usage role because that's how you win basketball games versus, hey, this year he's going too low and he's going to score 20 plus points and he's going to do it on high efficiency. Why are we letting him fall that far? They are completely separate arguments. And even though I seem like I'm polar opposites on my thoughts on him, that makes sense to me.
I don't know, man. Do you think we can all handle that level of nuance?
No, but that's where we are with it. So, yes, I don't think Sexton, and when you're looking at sort of dynasty value of these guys, well, Sexton might be this guy this year, but if I'm looking 4 years' time, I think his role is going to be, as we're seeing perhaps with like a guy like Buddy Hield this season, who's going to maybe move from a 34-minute starting role into that 28, 27-minute bench role that he had a couple of years ago. Like, that stuff can start to change. And as teams start to grow and get better, if the Cavs ever get better, those players who may not be driving that move into smaller roles.
I want to now look at towards the end of the mock draft. I think that's where everybody's focusing their attention as we all approach our real drafts as well. Your last 5 picks in the mock were Jalen Green, Daniel Gafford, Bojan Bogdanovic, Duncan Robinson, and Monte Morris. Who were you particularly excited about in that crop of 5?
Probably no one, to be honest. Maybe Jalen Green, but he was pretty rough yesterday. There's going to be some poor games from him for sure, with some bad efficiency. That Monte Morris one, there's no way I would make that pick again. He's just so low upside, I think, and with bunches of, or even like a bloke on his own team, Bones Highland, stepping up, and I think Bones is going to be a rotation guy straight away. But the guys that we can sort of find in that zone, like we did this mock weeks ago, I wouldn't be taking him there. Like, Bojan and Duncan Robinson are fine in that area, and it was more just me picking them to build out a team rather than taking a huge flyer on guys, because there's no upside in those no upside in those players. But they're solid enough. Actually, I don't mind the Bojan pick. I think he's maybe getting undervalued a bit because he was pretty good after, in the second half of the season when that wrist injury healed. And then Gafford was the other one who I think I'm really high on him early in the season. I don't know what they're going to do second half when Bryant comes back. But if they want any semblance of defense from that center position, I'm telling you, you're not getting it from Bryant or from Harrell. So he's probably going to have to stick in the rotation. But I don't know if I can trust Unseld yet because we haven't seen him coach.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my follow-up was what do you think that the season arc looks like for Daniel Gafford? To me, it seems like there's we don't know that Thomas Bryant's going to come back healthy. So there's a little bit of an unknown there where maybe Gafford stays good longer, and this format actually lends itself to that. Roto games cap, you can just sort of go until he's not useful anymore, and then you could punt him to the curb. But to get a guy... Where is this? This would probably be, I think this is around pick 100 or so. Yeah. To get a guy around 100 who, when he's the starting guy, has that 60, 75 type of upside, those are the guys that move the ball forward. I always talk about your page, your player page at Basketball Monster. The guys that are doing positive things for you tend to be the guys that are ranked like 80 or above, and other guys are sort of keeping the boat from sinking into the ocean. In a games cap format, you need as many of those positive impact guys as humanly possible. So I actually really like that pick on the Gafford front. I'm pro Daniel Gafford, and I don't even know who Jalen Green is, so I have to keep that joke going. Who are some of the guys in that late range, Josh, that kind of maybe you were eyeballing or targeting, that, or the one that got away? Is that a nice way to express it? Who is the love that got away in those late rounds?
I'm just going to bring up the draft room and have a little bit of a look and see sort of who was around that area. Because, again, this is so long. Like, I feel like my opinions have changed so much since we did that draft, which is what happens when you get more information, you get training camp, and you get all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, hey, by the way, while you're looking at that, when do you like to do your drafts? I like to go the weekend before the season starts.
In general, yes, I think I've got like the two big ones I've done for my listeners. There's one that's happening Thursday and one that's happening Monday. So sort of bookending the weekend there, and I've got another one that's coming up tomorrow. And that's generally when I do it. Like, I find you either wait the longest you can, right, to get this part of the season, after preseason and that, or you go super early when all of the ranks on the sites are out of control, like they're just completely insane. And
Totally
of course, all that stuff gets tightened up. Like, when you're drafting Isaiah Stewart at 130 when the first week of drafts come out, like, you're going to smash the value on those sites. So you either do it then or you do it after the preseason. I don't think there's any especially if you're switched on. If you do it early, you can just assemble an absolute super team at that point. I'm just having a look at these guys who I missed out on that I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed missing out on Mo Bamba in round 11. He's a pretty interesting option for me this year, and Josh Giddey, where Matt Lawson took him in round 11 as well. Like, I'm happily drafting Giddey in round 9-10 at this point. Like, he was a guy that I really like to target as a last round player, and back then, like, I think he was ranked 600th on Yahoo at that point, so I could get him in the last round of most spots. But Matt snagged him off me there in round 11.
Yeah, I'm having trouble getting Mo Bamba in places. I think I'm trying to figure out where he's actually going, and he's one of those guys that's moving so fast right now that if you draft today, go ahead.
So I did a mock draft yesterday, and this is the way that I approach it. Normally, it's like you go, well, your last 2-3 picks you take flyers on, but with the guys that I wanted. And it was, I believe, from memory, people who watch my show might be able to correct me, I think it was Giddey and Bamba that I took, but I got him in like round 8, round 9. And that might seem high. Or might have been 9. It was 9-10, I think, actually. And that might seem high. But my thought process was, these are the guys that if they hit, like Bamba hits and he plays 25 minutes, so that's a top 50 player. If Giddey gets any set of offense or shooting, and the fact that he can average 7 assists per game, like that's already mega valuable. And I think I got him at 110, right? So, that becomes like a top 80 guy. If they hit, then it works out. And then if I just need some stable guys, I can get that guy in round 12 and I'll take another flyer in round 13 rather than I'll just get the boring guy who's got zero chance of being better than a top 100 player. But if I know that these guys, I can take a flyer on Isaiah Roby, say, in round 12. Does he have the upside to hit top 50 like Mo Bamba? Like, not even a chance. I went earlier on those flyer types, even though there's still complete dart throws, because, Dan, as you know, a third of your roster probably gets turned over within the first 6 weeks of a season. Like, you just cut 4 or 5 guys, guys move on and off your roster straight away.
Yeah,
so if I have to take
sometimes more.
Yeah, if I have to take guys my 4th last pick in my round 9 pick or whatever, and in the end it doesn't work because Bamba plays 15 minutes a night, oh well, like, it's not killing me. But if it works, and if he plays 25 minutes a night, then bang, like, I'm right up there with like a 4th, 5th round type of player. Same with Giddey. So normally I would go later on those guys, but now I'm just going, well, this is the guy. Like, the upside is not 120 to 100. The upside is 100 to 50. And that jump is enough for me to take that swing on that guy.
Yeah, I totally get it. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here, but do you change when you start taking those home run hacks depending on whether it's head-to-head or roto? I think it's an easier sell job in roto because, again, you're looking for almost exclusively high upside guys. That's how you win a games cap format, is you don't use any games on someone who's not a big time positive. There is value in head to head in having, a top 110 guy who plays all 82 games, just because you're not getting any zeros there and they're sort of quietly plodding along. I feel like, and I do more roto and I think you do more head to head, I feel like maybe like a round later in head-to-head you start getting wild and woolly, or do you generally do it about the same?
About the same usually. I guess my difference is when I'm looking at that head-to-head leagues, I'm probably more, or say Roto Games Cap, I'm probably more forgiving of guys entering the season injured in a Roto Games Cap format. So,
right.
The number one example is going to be like a Pascal Siakam. Like, I feel more comfortable getting him in that format. But, you say that, you want guys to play games in head-to-head, and all that is true, but we want them to play games at the right time. Like, in nearly every head-to-head league, I'm more than happy to take losses for the first 2 weeks if necessary, right? Just to allow weird shooting, weird rotation roles to play out, to take flyers on guys that don't pan out. And then you hopefully start getting rolling round 4, round 5. And if guys miss time in the first 3 weeks, it doesn't kill you completely. As long as you get into the playoffs, like in 6 out of 12 make the playoffs, like it's not a huge high bar to get into. And as long as I've got my guys healthy and playing and good value happening and trying to accumulate all that value by the time we hit the playoffs, then that's what it's more important to me. Versus like if you miss a game in December versus missing a game in March, that's wildly different.
Talking to Josh Lloyd of Basketball Monster at RedRock_B-Ball on Twitter, do you find that there are more than a handful of really ill-advised drops made in the first couple of weeks simply because folks hate to see a loss on the ledger at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, they panic. And what the number one thing to do is if someone comes out and shoots like 18% across 3 games, that guy gets dropped straight away. And when you look at those numbers, the number one thing to say is, do you fully believe that a player is going to shoot, the player that's not Frank Ntilikina, that is going to shoot 18% for a season? And the answer to that question is no. Sorry, Frank, if you're listening. No one's going to shoot that for the season. It's like saying this guy's come out and he shot 70% on 3 across his first 7 games. You go, man, he's so red hot. Well, it's just not going to happen. And he's going to have a stretch of shooting 20%. This is how this stuff goes. So when someone comes out of the gate and averages 7 points per game because they're shooting 20% from the field, like just hold on. Because if you've got a track record of this bloke being a 40-rule field goal guy averaging 15 points and the shot attempts are there, the roll is there, the minutes are there, it's going to change. And that's where you look to attack patient managers in your league.
I've found it sometimes helpful to have my drop candidates ready. How do you pick your early season drops to go get maybe a panic drop? Like, maybe this question isn't phrased quite right. How do you know you're not making a panic drop yourself if you're going to try to scoop up someone else's panic drop?
It's a good question. The answer to that is it's all about valuing the player, and at a guy, say it is, let's say it's an Alperen Şengün. All right, so you've drafted him. You go, I hope he can play 22 minutes opening night. But if he comes out and they play him 6 minutes, or he doesn't, you're not in the rotation, I'll go, well, that's shit, because that's not going to happen. Maybe in March he gets back into the... But I'm not holding for that long, right? If someone's out there playing the minutes and the shots just aren't falling, I go, well, something's going to change. Or it's one of those, like if it's Monty Morris and he's out there and he's doing 11 points with 4.5 assists, okay, that's totally fine. If I drop him and someone else picks him, I'm not going to cry about it. Like, it doesn't matter. I can find those numbers somewhere else, even if it's just by streaming 2 guys in for the week to make up those numbers. Like, it's not a high upside play. So if it's him, it's Danny Green, it's Seth Curry. If it's one of those sort of guys who you know doesn't have that high upside, and there's someone else out you want to get, even though this player might technically end up as the 130th best player, and how can you drop him because that is clearly a rosterable guy? Oh, well, like I can find those numbers somewhere else.
That's well expressed. Sorry, I didn't plan on going down this path when we started talking, but the question sort of led us there, and I don't know. You know me, I like digging deep on stuff. So I'll use this actually as sort of a pivot into our last general topic of the show, which is draft day is coming for so many people. Like you said, you got a couple coming up here in the not too distant future. I think just by human nature, even if we study this all day, every day, we're prone to little things that kind of creep in on during the actual draft. And I know for me, the thing that always comes back, and it doesn't impact me every single time, but the feeling when your queue runs out right before your pick. And it seems so stupid, like I should be able to just put one more guy in my queue, but I never quite do it. So for me, it's always, I got to make sure when I set my queue, I put like 2 or 3 extra guys in there each time so that moment doesn't come up. What about you, Josh? What is the thing that you found sort of gets you on draft day, and then how do you combat that inside your own head even to overcome it and continue to clobber everybody?
Well, I'll tell you how I avoid that issue with the queue, Dan. I just don't set a queue. I just don't put those guys there, because the deflating nature of seeing guys fly out of that queue is frustrating.
Yeah, it's real. It's very real. Yeah,
I don't, because in the past I might go in there, and you can attest to this. You go in there and go, okay, well, I'm coming up. I'm 6 picks away. Let's put 3 guys in there. And then you go, oh, I'm going to get one of these guys. And they all go. And you go, oh, my God, I'm a mad scramble. What am I going to do? Because you're sort of not rested on your laurels, but you sat there and you were looking and going, I feel confident. I know what I'm doing for this next pick, and maybe I can look ahead. So what I tend to do is I might throw just some random names on there that might be far down a list, but not like these are the guys I'm picking at this next spot. And then when I'm one pick away, I take a look and I go, well, yeah, who do I want here, rather than like get my hopes up for this and get disappointed. So I try and leave it to the last minute. And again, that helps me because I've been doing this for 12 hours a day for however long it's been, right? So I feel pretty confident that when I get to it and it's my pick and I'm one away, that I can figure out who I'm taking in that area. There's no panic from me, but that's just from continual repetition and continual preparation in doing it. But I don't, that sort of, creating that cue can lead to that mental panic and mental fog, I guess, when that does get wiped out and you go, oh, what do I do now? And you don't actually think about, I know what to do and I've got these guys set. So I'd rather sort of not come in blankly, but like, all right, picks up, let's have a look. There we go. I've got a minute's longer than you think a lot of the time, and go from there. But that's a lot of repetition that gets me to that area.
Yeah, the interesting about a minute is that I feel like if it was shorter, a lot of us might make better picks. You spend the first 10 seconds of the minute looking at the guy you like, and then you spend the next 45 going, well, maybe I should do this guy, and then there's this guy, but I could also do that, and then in the last 5 seconds, you're like, and you go back and maybe take the first one you looked at anyway. What about draft, like, again, I know a lot of my questions come more from a roto standpoint and maybe don't address the punt philosophy as well, but how soon in a draft are you looking at your team's supposed strengths and weaknesses?
I think you have to look at it after every pick, to be honest. You don't have to focus in on it, but you have to be aware of where your team sits. Now, probably after the first pick, you're not hyper-focused on that, but I think you have to be aware of what your team is doing. But it's not just looking at what my team is doing. So I can't just look at it and go, oh, well, my team is pretty low in points. I'll sort that out later on because, as you know, Dan, like getting points or getting assists later is hard. Like if you want to get steals, you can find that later on. If you want to hit threes, you can find that later on. So understand, like it's not just about, well, I'll just get my assists and points in round 10 and 11 because it's just impossible. So having an understanding, like if I don't get them now, like I'm in real trouble. Okay, understanding that part of it versus, well, I can actually wait on the threes and I don't have to take Buddy Hield at pick 60 because I can get Duncan Robinson 70 picks later and provide me the same amount of threes versus if I'm relying upon Reggie Jackson to get me assists in round 11 or if it's Kyle Lowry in round 7. Like those differences between where I can get numbers is almost as important as understanding where you're lacking. And you've got to combine those two things together to know what you need to do with your next pick. And that ties back in, this is, really top level narrative stuff here, Dan, but it ties back into the Colin Sexton pick. Like points there, I can't get them later on. Like I can't get 23 points later on, even though I might not like his low volume of threes. Oh, well, I'll just add Duncan Robinson and Bojan Bogdanovic in round 11 and 12 to help me in that area.
So when I'm looking at that same philosophy, and I do have a point that I'm going to get to here, I promise. One thing that I think a lot of folks struggle with, and I think I've run into it a couple of times in really competitive roto leagues where I start to think, okay, what do I need to do here? Do you have sort of a mental, it's not a clock, it's really more like a mental like bouncing needle that says, okay, it's my 4th rounder, it's my 5th rounder, and I can see that my team is pretty weak in big man stats, but there's this guard or wing or whoever that's on the board that I have like 15 slots higher than the next big man that I see on the board in my own rank list. Is that, do you address your need in a situation like that, or you think you're still going best player available? I'm probably on the best player side in general, and then hoping maybe you can make a trade part way, but I also know that like Yahoo Pro Leagues, apparently nobody trades because everybody just vetoes everything, so maybe those options aren't on the table. And I know I'm putting so many variables into this one question, but how do you address that side of it? Like when you see a team need, but that player that would take care of it is not at all your favorite player on the board.
I've probably switched, or not switched, or at least changed my opinion. I used to very much be like, well, let's look at the rank and the ADP, and I can get this guy later if I wait. But given, the way that values lie in a draft, it's not a linear process, right? So like, the difference between pick 1 and pick 5 is not the difference between pick 65 and pick 70. It's just not. Like, the difference between pick 1 and let's say pick 1 and pick 10 is like the difference between pick 40 and pick 80, right? It's such a bell curve distribution, if we want to use it that way, that these guys later on, they average 0.1 steal per game more or less. They can flip 20 spots really quickly, and I don't have the ability to be able to accurately project those numbers and say, well, this guy is definitely number 50 and this guy is number 80, and therefore I can't do anything more, because I'm very well aware that what I do has a margin of error in this stuff. So if the reason that this bloke here is at number 80 is because I've got him averaging 13 points and 7 rebounds instead of 14 points and 7.5 rebounds, and if those numbers happen, he becomes 50th. Oh well, like, the difference in those picks, as crazy as it sounds, it's not that wild. It's not that different in those areas. So if there's someone you want, and this happened in this mock draft yesterday, centers, Dan, you see they start flying off round 4. Like, you get like 6-7 centers in a row, Capella and Valanciunas and Jaren Jackson and John Collins, all these center eligible guys fly off. So people are like, oh my God, I've got no centers. And then Jarrett Allen started getting picked in the 50s, and Jakob Poeltl started getting picked in the 50s. And then you're like, okay, well, what am I? I'm either skewing that position completely, or I need to start doing something about it. Otherwise, I'm going to be left with bloody Jock Landale as my starting center.
Nice.
And that's not a great situation to be in. So you've got to adjust to what's happening in that draft. And people were starting to adjust in that draft because, like, oh, I've got nothing left. I've got no centers. So if I don't get Jarrett Allen at pick 60 or pick 55, then that team is done, even though he might be the 80th guy or the 90th guy, or whatever number you have him. If you don't get it, then your replacement level comes back to your Nick Richards at center. And no one wants that. Just throwing out shitty centers for everybody to get a laugh at.
So you're good with taking the position or statistical need, and it sounds like, yeah?
Yeah, because we can look at ranks and we can look at projections, Dan, but this stuff's not 100% accurate. It's not 90% accurate. So I can't, say, people say, you just said it then, and not saying this to argue with it, or we can fight if you want, but best player available, I don't know who the best player is. You don't know who the best player is. The best player available will be determined later in the season. We have our guesses at it, but you saying this is best player available, and 30 other people will tell you that it's a different best player available at that same spot. And I think you got to have that open mind to understand that I don't know who the best player available is, but what I do know is that getting a position or a particular stat, like I can 100% tell you that Mike Conley versus Jarrett Allen, they are going to give me rebounds, threes, free throws. Assists, threes, free throws, rebounds, blocks, field goal percentage. I know that that's going to happen for Allen versus Conley. I know that that's going to happen, but I can't sit here and tell you 100% who is best player available. Nobody can. We can have our best guesses at it, but I can 100% tell you what they're going to be strong in.
Yeah, I mean, that actually does sort of lend itself to the Besbris Bucket series of episodes I did. So I'm not going to argue with it at all. The fact that a lot of these guys, and particularly like you were talking about, that 40 to 80 chunk, or like the 80 until the end of time chunk, those guys are really, really close together. And it's why, when you were talking about a player that was shooting 18%, this hypothetical player, I mean, my brain was just like, oh, he's talking about Rob Covington, who jumped from like 130 to 40 by switching from shooting 26% to 40%. So those little things happen, and they can move so fast that, yeah, I think you do, like, if something is about to dry up, you do need to address that. If you're in a league, I think, where people are really open to trades, I think it makes this decision easier. You can take the guy that you really, really want, and maybe you briefly askew the stats that your team needs, and perhaps you can go get them later from maybe a better guy. But it sounds to me like a lot of leagues just don't trade anymore, and that kind of sucks. But it is what it is. Josh, thank you for indulging me on this weird theoretical deep dive that I had no intention of doing on today's show, but you accompanied me on this journey into the forest, and we seem to have made it out alive.
No problem, Dan. It was fun to get in strategy talk.
Yeah, this is the good stuff. This is the meaty stuff, because we're about to start a season where we're just going to have to talk about the exact things that happened the night before for 155 straight days, right?
That is true. It is exciting, but also like, oh, it is true.
Yeah, I like to make sure we're feeling the dog days before the season even starts. That's my strategy on all of this. The great Josh Lloyd, ladies and gentlemen, at RedRock_B-Ball on Twitter. Josh, thank you so much, man. Can we do this again in November?
Yeah, sounds good, Dan.
And that time I won't make you walk down 20 minutes of theory with me. Sound good?
Yeah, we'll just talk about how I'm trying to think of a funny player. How Caleb Martin, I said he was going to start in Miami because half their team was going to be struck down by COVID protocols.
Yeah, we'll go back and we'll look at that prediction in November. Thanks, Josh.
No worries. Thanks, Dan.
Well, you heard him, folks. Better make this show more downloaded than the Matt Smith episode, who I don't know if the kid is out yet for Matt. The kid. This is like, most parents think that I'm a horrible human being, that I just refer to them as the kid. That's creatures. Thing 1 and thing 2 in this household. So let's do that. Let's try to make this thing extremely well downloaded. And if you enjoyed the show, the visit from Josh, and everything we've been doing here on Fantasy NBA today, please do take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. 5-star reviews, much appreciated. If you want to write something fun, I may be able to, if I can bring myself to look at the reviews, because I'm always petrified, I can read that on air. It's a little bit annoying to figure out where the hell you can do this, but quickly here, if you're on a mobile device, open the podcast app. This is for Apple devices. Search for Fantasy NBA Today. You can't just go to the show that you're already listening to, which just is completely idiotic, but you got to search for Fantasy NBA Today, click on the show title, meaning like, not the episode title, the show logo, the big one, and then at the bottom of the page you go to from there, that's where you can rate and review on a mobile device. If you're on iTunes, it's a little bit easier. You navigate to the podcast tab, search for Fantasy NBA Today, click on the show, and then there's a rate and review button. I really would appreciate it. That is a big, 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 big deal for us here. It's how more people can find the show. It's how we can kind of be trending as often as possible, and that's the best way to grow this thing. So thank you in advance for doing that. This show, as all of our shows, brought to you by our friends at manscaped.com and mybookie.ag. By the way, I do have one fantasy blip coming up at the end of the show, so stick around here. Hang with me. All of us yesterday won $25 on mybookie.ag. I hope you guys did it with me. I know at least a few hundred of you did, because we've communicated about it in the past. Whenever the hell the next odd boost comes out, I'll be sure to let you know. That was a super easy one. I don't pay any attention to hockey. All I know is that someone was like, Dan, it hit. That's all I needed. Someone told me, I didn't even remember it was going. Dan, it hit. So we all won $25 together on a MyBookie odds boost on the start of the NHL season. My guess is there will probably be one for the start of NBA, but I don't know yet. And when I find out, I'll let you know. So let's all do it together. If you haven't signed up for an account, please do so at mybookie.ag. It works in like 250 countries. Not all of them, but many. And when you sign up, use promo code HoopBall so they know who sent you. Over at Manscaped, meanwhile, they're back and they're rolling with us again. And you're grooming and you're trimming and you're having a good old time. Sleek. You're sleek like a dolphin. Use promo code HoopBall20 to get 20% off and free shipping on whatever you get at manscaped.com. Sideburn trimmers, ear and nose hair trimmers, actual straight razors, with blades. Yes, I know, for real. They have replacement blades for both the actual straight razor and replacement blades for their trimmers. They've got boxers, they've got shirts, they've got powders, they've got lotions, they've got moisturizers, they've got shaving creams. Whatever you want to get over there, use promo code HoopBall20 to get 20% off and free shipping. That's how they know where you got it, and that's how you get a damn fine deal. I got asked, and it's my own fault, because I put out a question on Twitter that just said, hey, you guys pick. Who do you want me to talk about on Twitter today? And a lot of different things came in. But I think the most, and this is tough because there were, to say that it was like the most requested, this is very much like a majority kind of thing that was happening. So it's not like one got a whole bunch and every other question didn't really. It was more like a name that I saw flash by a bunch of times that I thought I could bring to the podcast to give you guys a little bit of a taste of what I'm going to try to do with these players on Twitter going forward is DeAndre Hunter, oddly enough. And we haven't talked much about him on the podcast at this point. And the reason is that I'm just not that excited about it. We got some other names that popped up a few times. Bradley Beal came up a couple of times, oddly enough, which I thought was relatively surprising. But, with Beal, I think I can make it pretty quick. Don't mess with it much. Don't mess with your rankings much, I mean. He just got over COVID 3 months ago, I think. So while, we want everybody to be vaccinated, and that makes our lives easier from a fantasy draft standpoint, he's going to be subject to stricter protocols. So there might be, he might get quarantined for 5 or 6 days at some point in there. But from a do we think he's actually going to catch it standpoint, I don't think that he's really any more likely than anyone else in the NBA to catch it. Maybe I would argue less likely because we're seeing that, vaccinations, their efficacy against symptomatic illness, meaning actually catching it in even a mild version like a cold, it does wane over time. So, if there's an NBA player who got vaccinated in February, by February of this coming year, they might be more likely to get it than Beal. So don't worry about it from that standpoint. I'm not here to argue vaccine efficacy. Obviously, it's better to have protection in every respect. I'm just saying that we also don't want to ignore the fact that Beal does have some measure of protection himself. So don't move him too far down the board. They said, Dan, your immunology degree wouldn't come in handy in sports, and yet here we are. Don't move him too far down the board. Protocol could be an issue where other guys, if they're exposed to someone with COVID in their inner circle, they probably can just keep playing until they test positive. Beal would have to quarantine. That's 2 to 3 missed ball games. That could happen a couple of times, but it also might not. He's going to have to stay in hotels on the road, so he may be less exposed to stuff. He might end up being somehow a safer play. I don't think that's true. Odds are it probably tips the other direction, but it's not a situation. I'm here to talk a little bit about DeAndre Hunter today. And a lot of guys got asked about. So don't worry if you asked about someone else on Twitter. I'll try to get to many of those on social media. And it's why I want you guys to follow me at Dan Bespris, because I can't do all of this on a podcast. And I can sort of intermittently throughout a day throw stuff onto social media. The reason I haven't talked that much about DeAndre Hunter is frankly that I don't believe that what he did was repeatable. He finished last year at number 97 on a per-game basis, but was much better than that pre-injury. He tried to come back a couple of times, and because he only played 23 games on the year, 4 or 5 games at a severe minutes limit dramatically changed his averages for the entire season. It would be much more wise of all of us, much more prudent, to look at DeAndre Hunter from the start of last season through his injury, which was the first month and a half or so of the year. So December 22nd last year started, and just put mid-February, because he was gone by then and he wasn't back. Over that stretch of time, Hunter was much closer to a top 50 type of guy. In fact, he was number 49. So very close to a top 50 kind of guy. On averages of 17 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.7 threes, a steal, half a block, 51% from the field, and 88% at the free throw line. I'm not here to tell you that it can't be done again. It could. It might happen again. What I'm here to do is to advise on things that are more or less likely to happen than any other thing. So in this particular instance, do we think DeAndre Hunter is more likely to do the same thing again or less likely? We could look at his rookie season and see that he shot 41% from the field and 35.5% from downtown. And then we could look at this last season and say, dude is 48.5% from the field and only 32.5% from downtown. His rookie year, he shot 76% at the free throw line. This last season, he shot 86% at the free throw line. The things that stayed relatively consistent year over year, steal rate, about 0.8 in starters minutes. Block rate, somewhere in the 0.4, 0.5 range in starters minutes. Rebounds, about 4.5 to 5 in starters minutes. Assists, a little under 2 in starters minutes. So those I think we can pretty much plant our flag in. Just mark them down. Put it in pen. The thing we really don't know is, can his 2-point shooting percent hold up, and can his free throw percent hold up? Because unfortunately, when you peel back the layer of him having an extraordinary jump season over season, a lot of it looked a little bit more like a mirage. Not to say that guys don't get better between their rookie and sophomore seasons. They very often do. But to jump almost 8% from the field and 10% at the free throw line on almost the exact same volume is unexpected for a player who fantasy-wise doesn't actually have a good deal of upside in the non-scoring related categories. Under 5 rebounds for a wing is kind of meh. Not bad, but certainly not good. Probably a little better than mediocre. Under 2 assists for a wing playing starters minutes is not very good. Under a steal for a wing playing starters minutes is not very good. Half a block is probably about average for a small forward or someone who plays where he plays on the floor, sometimes even power forward. Mostly John Collins there, but a minute or two in the book. So the other stuff, turnovers are low, so I guess that's a good thing for 9-cap, but the rebounds, the assists, the steals, the blocks, that's not going to float his value. He's not the kind of guy where if the scoring stuff didn't stick, that everything else will hold. And remember, he shot 51% before his injury. So he was really storming the barn at that point. He was coming in full force, 88% at the free throw line on 4 attempts per game over that stretch. I don't know which DeAndre Hunter we get this year. Presumably not the one who's badly injured, but we do know that we're getting a DeAndre Hunter who doesn't get defensive stats and doesn't rebound and doesn't assist very much, on a team that has Trae Young to do the distribution and Clint Capella and John Collins to do the rebounding/interior stuff. So what the hell is his job besides he better be a really efficient scorer? And when you, again, adjusted for, even if you took his early season numbers and you only adjusted the percentages down, because again, if you look at then how he did from his injury to the end of the year, I don't even think he was on the leaderboard. Yeah, he was outside the top 175, 200 at that point. So even if you just took his early season numbers and adjusted the percentages down to even what he did over the entire season, you're talking about a guy who kind of barely hangs on inside the top 100, and I don't think has much in the way of upside. His upside, we saw. We saw it because his percentages were so freaking good for the first month and a half, but we never really got data on whether they were sustainably good. I believe they were not. I believe DeAndre Hunter is a low upside, probably going to hover in that 90 range. If things, really, they kind of still need to break his way, because that team has a crap ton of options when they're healthy. Cam Reddish, he'll be playing this year. Bogdan Bogdanovic will be playing this year. Those guys weren't really a factor early on last season. I believe Danilo Gallinari was out to start the year also. And he was just coming back when Hunter went down. There's just too much competition, so I don't see his shot attempts going up from 11. Might even see them come down by half a field goal attempt per game. So where is the upside? Which is my argument for, okay, if you're in a head-to-head league and you need points on what I would assume are reasonable percentages, fine, take him near 100. That's fine. He'll probably just plod along all year. We have every reason to believe that he'll be healthy this season. We don't really have data otherwise. He hasn't been in the league long enough to say that there's some lingering problem here. But if you're like me and around pick 100, you're chasing someone who can actually be a real difference maker for your team, whether it's someone who plays like Hunter but has a better track record of health, or someone who has an equally spotty health track record, even in a 1 or 2 seasons, but has this opportunity in front of them that Hunter simply doesn't have. Those are the directions I'd rather go at this point. He just doesn't interest me because not only is he not super healthy in his first 2 years in the NBA, he only missed 9 games his first season, so not a big deal, but then only played 28. That's including the playoffs, 23 out of 72 in the regular season this last year. And again, he might play 82 games this year, but it's not like there's a track record there. I'd rather go for either other type. Give me a guy with a track record of health, or give me a guy who has some sort of big-time upside. And it's just not really there with Hunter. Which sucks for me to have to do a show like this, because I'd rather just say nice things about everybody. But from a fantasy standpoint, I'm not seeing the appeal. Frankly, when he came back and he played starters minutes in the playoffs for Atlanta this year, and again, admittedly, like, he was still dinged up at that point. He averaged 11 and 4, didn't get any steals, small sample size, shot 75% at the free throw line. So I don't even know that the free throw thing is something we can believe was real. Anybody can get hot for a month and a half. It's not that crazy. Guys get hot for a month and a half, then they go real cold. I don't think we truly know what DeAndre Hunter is, but I bet he's closer to 47% than 51% this year. I bet his free throws are closer to 80 than they are to 87. Without any other adjustments to his numbers. Even while he was getting a lot of attempts in the first half of the year. If you just remove the positive impact of his percentages over that run, then he's like outside the top 80. Where's the fun there? Take him at 100 for a guy who's going to be like 95? I don't know, man. So not a big DeAndre Hunter guy, and that's one of the names that I got asked about today, and certainly it's easier to do that kind of breakdown on a podcast than on Twitter, because on Twitter you got to be a bit more brief, but that's the type of stuff we're going to try to do on social media here as we roll towards everybody's drafts. I know they're all coming up in the not-too-distant future. Folks, again, please do follow me on Twitter at Dan Bespris. One more big ol' thank you to our buddy Josh Lloyd for popping on the show. I'll actually be on his show here in the next few minutes, so perhaps you guys can catch us there. We're doing questions on a YouTube live stream. He is at RedRock_B-Ball on Twitter. I am at Dan Bespris. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoop ball presentation. Go get yourself a Brewski 150 over at hoop-ball.com and hit me up if you want to join the ranks here at Hoopball. Be one of our writers, our contributors, our podcasters, you name it. We're looking for you. Have a great Wednesday, everybody. Back tomorrow. We're going to do a redux on Thursday. A redux of Yahoo's top 25 pre-rank. And then I'd like to get into some ESPN stuff here before the week is done as well. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.